Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can, and I continue with Strangeland with the developer commentary.
Hey, stranger!
Strangeland's protagonist is sometimes identified as the Stranger, less often as Ego. The list of relevant references to the name the Stranger would be too numerous to include. Albert Camus' The Stranger is probably the most prominent. As the novel notes, in a universe suddenly deprived of life and illusions, man feels himself a stranger. The exile is irrevocable, since he has no memories of a lost homeland and no hope of a promised land.
Shh, we're supposed to be men.
Masks are a central theme of Strangeland. Maybe not to the extent that masks are a theme of, say, Mask of the Betrayer, one of my favorite role-playing games, but they're quite important. Here, with the maskettes, there are literal masks, but in general, all of the NPCs you encounter in the game, and even the stranger himself, is really a mask, a disguise of the underlying widower who is imagining this place. There aren't different minds inside this one mind. Every being that you encounter is a manifestation of the same mind, presenting itself to itself in different ways. So we might say that there are masks for the stranger, we might say there are masks for the widower, and that the stranger is himself a mask. The maskettes wear their masks literally, but the other faces are no more real than the papier-mâché faces on the masks. This superego alludes to this in the phone call when he talks about Matryoshka. Nesting dolls aren't masks, but they're like masks in that one covers another. There's something underneath that can only be revealed by stripping away the outer layer. And, you know, I guess I would say that there's another aspect of masquerade here, and that's the masquerade that you'll see quoted from the Caprichos by Goya. And that's the way in which, outside of our minds, in the real world, we all wear masks in how we present ourselves to other people. And a considerable part of the agony that the stranger is going through is not just the loss of his wife, but it's looking back at the masks that he's worn, at the ways in which he's sublimated or deleted aspects of his identity to present himself in a different way to the world. And you get some of that when you talk to Rhoda and ask him what your name is, and he essentially says you need to be able to name yourself, that you can't define yourself by virtue of what other people call you. And so in all of these ways, I think we might say masks are the opposite of identity, and Strangeland is largely a game about the protagonist finding out who he himself is and recapturing his identity and his agency, and masks are an obstacle to that.
Valkyrie.
The opening Act 3 of Wagner's 1870 opera Die Valkyrie features a famous piece of music called The Ride of the Valkyries. In Norse mythology, a Valkyrie was a kind of war angel responsible for bringing dead mighty warriors to Valhalla, where they would join Odin's retinue as Einara, lone warriors. In Wagner's opera, based on the Nibelungenlied, which is referenced throughout Strangeland, the Valkyrie Brunhilde forswears her service to Odin to aid the hero Sigmund. Later, she is rescued by another hero, Siegfried, and the two find find in each other the light-bringing love and laughing death. The theme of mutual rescue, light-bringing love and overcoming the sorrow of death is later invoked by the woman in the game's finale.
It must be the name of the ride. This ride looks like a death trap, but I guess it's the only way up. The tracks lead up into the sky. 3 women wearing masks, I think. Who are you?
Well, we're sure not Valkyries. Don't let that sign confuse you.
And we're not fates neither, just 'cause there's 3 of us.
In mythology, 3 female fates called Moirai or Parkei or Norns, in Greek, Roman or Norse mythology respectively, weave the destinies of humans and gods alike. These masqueraders disclaim any responsibility for the stranger's destiny and remain passive.
That's more Murmur's thing.
Murmur, like the fates, can see past, present and the future.
We're not weird sisters.
The 3 prophetic woe-sowing witches of Macbeth. See Macbeth. I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. To you they have showed some truth. These witches are sometimes associated with the Fates or Norns. Weird was the Norse concept of fate.
Even if we are strange. After all, you're a stranger still.
Okay, you've said who you're not, but who are you?
Just think of us as fragments.
Figments.
Pigments.
Ugh.
What? We're here to add color, aren't we?
Do you have names?
The 3 Masketeers!
Ugh.
Look, I'm sure you mean well. But everybody knows not to give their name to a stranger.
What's with the masks?
Giant paper-mache masks such as those worn by the masqueraders appear with some frequency in carnival celebrations around the world. There are some examples, but they seemingly transcend regionalism.
Everyone wears them.
You've got one too!
What?
We all have a role to play.
And in this story, there's only room for one woman.
That's why we've gotta be guys.
What's under the mask?
Nothing.
Legends say it's death to gaze upon a masker, unmasked.
This and the following lines paraphrase a scene in the seminal adventure game Loom, in which the hooded protagonist, Bobbin Threadbare, is asked to show his face. Bobbin, like the Fates, was Weaver, raising questions about the masquerader's candor when claiming not to be Fates.
But I bet you don't pay attention to foolish gossip like that.
Yeah, there's nothing to fear under here. Get it?
Ugh.
What do you mean I'm wearing a mask?
In T.S. Eliot's Hollow Men, a poem referenced to Strangeland, Eliot writes, "In Death's dream kingdom, let me also wear such deliberate disguises, rat's coat, crowskin, crossed staves in a field, behaving as the wind behaves. Masks and disguises are a key theme of the game, not just through the characters such as the Maskettes, but in the final sense that the denizens of Strangeland are all disguised version of the stranger himself, wearing various disguises mentioned in the Hollowed Man."
Oh, come on, stranger. You don't really think you escaped from some sanitarium?
Cult classic adventure game released in 1998, one of many inspirations for Strangeland. And I did play it on the channel actually, and I loved it. Sanitarium is actually the first classic point-and-click adventure game I have ever played in my entire life, and I absolutely loved it. I probably wouldn't be playing this if I didn't play Sanitarium, because Sanitarium was what sort of got me interested in the genre of adventure games.
Sporting a retro straitjacket and movie star stubble.
We all dress our best to fit what we think the world wants.
And in a strange land, it suits a man to be estranged.
Another reference to Exodus, I have been a stranger in a strange land. The use of estranged emphasizes that the stranger's status is that of a person who has been alienated from someone he was once close to. He is estranged from himself and from the woman.
I met an old scribe under a tree.
Ugh, he's the worst. His handwriting's terrible. I wanted A3 to make me a gaggle of bagels. And you don't even want to guess what I wound up with when I showed him the note that old man wrote.
Where am I?
Well, stranger, I have a feeling you're not in Kansas anymore.
The Wizard of Oz, this classic expression of being transported from a familiar real world to a fantasy world.
Ugh, come on. Enough with the one-liners.
Fine. You're at wit's end.
Just cut the poor guy a break.
All right then. We'll call it the breaking point.
Don't let that old crab get you down. Remember what they say. Home is where the heart is.
What can you tell me about Murmur?
He's got a head for prophecies.
There was a golden-haired woman who...
The woman.
There's only one of them in your story.
We won't judge.
The masqueraders are alluding to the Bechdel test, satisfied only when there are at least two women in the work and they talk to each other about something other than a man. Strangeland does not pass this test.
Can you tell me anything about her?
She's trying to save you.
You need to find her.
You're kind of a Hansel in distress.
The masquerade is punning off of Damsel in Distress while referencing the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel collected by the brothers Grimm. In the tale, after Hansel and Gretel are unable to find their way home, they are trapped by a witch. Gretel must free Hansel before he is eaten. The analogy here is to the woman's effort to free the stranger from his despair and lead him back home to the real world and life.
Where can I find her?
Up.
Up.
And away.
A classic refrain from 1940s Superman radio plays, typically uttered by Superman before embarking on a rescue or chasing down a villain.
Do you know anything about the dark thing?
I'm scared of the dark.
While I wait for the dusk.
You'll find out soon enough.
Can I look under your mask?
Can't say we didn't warn him.
Nothing. Absolute nothing.
Told ya.
What did I see under there?
You saw the reason why everyone wears masks. I promise we won't ask to look under yours.
Goodbye.
Yep. Good luck. Please, help me.
Dark thing. You are going to die, and she is going to live. Do you hear me? Well, I guess I made it. It's holding the cage shut. Just looking at it is agony. I need to kill it.
In May of 2017, I came across a listing for Adventure Jam 2017, a competition or jam where people would make adventure games over a 2-week span. James, Vic, and I had never done one of these jams before, and it had been a while since we had collaborated, the three of us, and I thought it might be a fun thing to try. So on May 6th, I reached out to Vic and sent him some text messages, which I've dug up, in which I propose that we participate in the jam. And I say, my general idea is kind of Gorman-Gastian, by which I mean impossible space with all sorts of weirdness in it. It's populated by strange beings. You're a person, semi-amnesiac. You can die, but it doesn't end the game. So death can be used to advance puzzles. It's some kind of purgatorio. And Vic, of course, takes off running with this idea, the notion that we would do strange, surreal, nightmarish dream space is right up his alley. But at this point, the jam has already started, so we have 13 days left. We spend several days just procrastinating and not accomplishing anything. And then on May 12th, having now burned an entire week of the 2-week contest, I send an email to James in which I say, Vic and I are mulling making a game for a jam that's running right now. I know you're on vacation, but do you have any interest in throwing in with us, or would you rather just relax? We have a week left. Smiley. Really, this topic could be called the 1-week project, because that was the theory we had, that somehow we could make Strangeland in a week. Vic sent around a sketch of the rooms of the game, which really does pretty closely correspond to the main park area that we have now. And I sent out a list of the puzzles, kind of walkthrough, that also corresponds pretty closely to what we call Act 1 of the game, the first time that you ascend up to the cage. And we just started making it. It pretty quickly became clear that we were not going to finish in a week. Weeks turned into months, but it still seemed like it was going to be pretty manageable in scope. So we were feeling optimistic that we were going to make a small game. It was going to be a test run for doing a future project, and we still thought that it could be contained.
I'm coming for you.
This mysterious chamber was clearly significant.
In April 2018, a little less than a year after we had started work on the project, the game was actually nearly done. In terms of the scope we had originally envisioned, it had all of the rooms, it had all of the puzzles, it even had extra content beyond what we had originally planned. Now, it's true that we had thought that we could make the game in a week, and it had taken closer to a year, but all things considered, 1 year to develop a game would have been relatively quick for us. But while we're developing the game, we're just playing it over and over again, finding things to polish, finding things to adjust, finding things to add here or there. And, I've probably played it 100 times, maybe more by the point we're wrapping it up. I'm sure James and Vic have played it an equal number of times too. And along the way, we've been throwing ideas back and forth and generally discarding them. But all of us have this feeling that something is a little bit off. The original concept of the game is really just Act 1 of what we have now. So you go up the ride. The first time you fall, you break the tree branch, and the tree branch, the news let you pull. At that time, you pulled the golden hair out of the well, and then you could make the wings. You go up a second time, and you just win the game. So it was a much shorter game, and we just had this feeling that it was too easy. Not in terms of the puzzle difficulty, that it was too easy in terms of the protagonist's journey, that something seemed off about only going up the ride twice. Typically in fairy tales, you have to do something 3 times. In the fact that you could just immediately go up again, it was really just one more little thing you had to do after you fell the first time, seemed to rob the initial fall of its heft. And while we had been involved in discussing the game as we were developing it, Victor kept saying that he wanted to have this sort of sideshow area where there would be these weird creatures or freaks. And we wondered, well, maybe we could add something like that in. And we also had this well sequence where you just fished into the well to get out the golden hair, and that seemed a little bit thin too. So we had this idea that we would add in the Mysteries of the Deep, which is to the right of the well, and that you would be able to actually descend into the well, and there would be 2 rooms down there. This seemed like it was a totally manageable process. We did tear apart a lot of other puzzles and dialogue to make it work because, in my view, you can't just expand something without making it all integrated together. But we were confident that with this modest expansion, then the game would be the right size and it would be done and we could do it quickly. Maybe it would just take a week or 2.
Judging from the fact that it is named Expansion 1, I suppose it did not take a week or 2, and they are going to come back to that.
Querent. Now the Emperor is loose from his throne. Your priestess is caged. And you, like a fool, climb and descend this tower as if on Escher's stairs.
Murmur is alluding to MC Escher's famous depiction of the so-called Penrose Stairs in Ascending and Descending, in which an optical illusion presents a staircase on which one can walk up or down forever in an infinite loop.
You will wear yourself to nothing on this journey to nowhere, unless you fly free. You need fire and spirit and golden wings, and a Valkyrie to set you on the right road. Go to her! Go to her now!
This is what I meant when I said you only make things worse. You're the one who opened the cage, but everyone else is going to suffer. It's not going to stop with Murmur. It's not even going to stop with her.
Valkyrie! Valkyrie!
You said death was different, but what about Murmur?
Guess it was his time to go.
Goodbye. It's as if Murmur's head has been hollowed out.
A reference to the Hollow Man?
I guess I hit that branch on the way down. It's tied too well. There.
Life always gives you a rope long enough to hang yourself, and then some.
That part at the base looks ready to break off.
Behold the claws, fit for one who would grasp and clutch.
What's it doing? Is that her? No!
That doesn't look good.
You have to help me kill the dark thing.
Masks don't make us heroes.
A common theme in comic books is whether the characters' masks make them more or less heroic. In the 2019 TV series Watchmen, characters assert, among other things, that people who wear masks are driven by trauma and that you can't heal under a mask. As the masqueraders have noted, the stranger is himself wearing a mask.
That's not our job in this story.
We're really just the peanut gallery.
The chorus.
The Greek chorus provided commentary on the events of a play. The chorus's ode was broken into three parts: strophe, antistrophe, and epode. As the masqueraders suggest, they are costumed, aside from their papier-mâché masks, as chorus girls.
Strophe.
Antistrophe.
And epode.
Chorus girls.
No, we're supposed to be guys.
Well, whatever we are, we're not mentors.
So, look for help somewhere else.
What did the dark thing do to the car?
It snuffed the spirit lamps.
Without spirits, the Valkyrie has no reason to ride.
You must find a way to kindle them again.
What exactly am I doing with those lamps?
Giving the old girl something to carry up.
Goodbye. Picture in my mind. 431-1013. Yeah, I get the message.
The wind effect that is present mostly in Acts 1 and 2 is historically the most important visual effect because if I never implemented it, none of the other visual effects would be feasible. It was the first big test of the engine's extended capabilities with complex code functions, and I had to make sure that the answer I got from my experiments was the right one. Essentially, the wind effect is nothing more than a derivative version of a particle generator, with the addition of a circularly angled motion on the particles every fourth loop. In essence, it is nothing more than a three-layer particle emitter. The three layers are background, small dust speckles, middle ground, dust speckles, and foreground, big dust speckles. But But the wind gives this barren, strange feeling to the player, this unwelcoming, dusty carnival that he's now finding himself in.
In the fall of 2016, my grandmother, who had been suffering from dementia for many years, died. And my step-grandfather, who had been caring for her, died shortly thereafter. I think it was pretty clear that the only thing he had been living for at that point was to take care of her. And Strangeland is absolutely inspired by, sort of the wrong word, but it is a game in which I'm working through grief and thinking about the last years of my grandparents' lives. My grandfather had been a NASA engineer, and when I was a little boy, he got us a computer, which we hooked up to black and white television. It was an Apple IIc, and he taught me the basics of programming on it. And that was really what got me started down the path of making computer games. And over the years, he played a lot of the games that I made, the simple ones I made. And then as I got older, he would gather science articles that he thought would be helpful in the science fiction I was writing. He didn't enjoy video games, I don't think. He didn't enjoy science fiction. There's no evidence to me that he ever read science fiction other than what I wrote. But he wanted to support me in that, and also he saw opportunities for solving problems, problems with the shortfalls in my own scientific knowledge, problems with my games, flaws in the artificial intelligence and whatever. My grandmother had been a university professor and became a genealogist, and much of the last decades of her life she spent tracing her family lineage, trying to situate herself in a web of human experiences across history. And she shared, what she found with us. Honestly, genealogy is not a passion of mine, but it was interesting. And the two of them actually, he was her third husband, and for most of my life, they were a couple, but they weren't married. And they got married just before my wife and I got married. I think they got married because they wanted to just make it easier for us to introduce them to people at the wedding, that it would be easier to just say, here are my grandparents, they're married, here's my grandmother and her husband. As dementia narrowed my grandmother's self-awareness, her awareness of others, my grandfather tried to engineer solutions. It's not a problem that can be solved, though. There are ways you can mitigate it, but after a while the mitigating strategies don't really work. It's just a slow and steady deletion of a person, her memories, her relationships, that web of connections that she had extended not just through the present but into the past, bit by bit, strand by strand, broken. And he kept trying to mitigate. I'm not sure the mitigating strategies worked. But he was a person who had a set of tools, engineering tools, mental tools, and he wanted to try to solve this problem with those tools and tried. And then when it couldn't be solved and she died, then he died too. And I was responsible for going through their apartment. And he's serving as executor of the will and making sure that things got to everyone who should get them. And it was a small apartment. It was very neat, and he had made it neat. And as I went through it, I found all of these souvenirs. They had moved into smaller and smaller living spaces over the years, so they'd thrown away a lot of things. But even still, this was their most precious stuff. His old engineering manuals, a flag that had been in orbit around the Earth, the telegram he received when he was called up for service in Korea, her genealogical charts, slides of the trips they had taken. And he had set aside some things that would be helpful for me in Fallen Gods, which is a Norse-inspired game, role-playing game I'm working on. Lewis chessmen replicas that they had gotten on one of their trips. Photographs of the Scandinavian countryside. And there were wood blanks. He was a wood carver, turned things on a lathe, and there were blanks for things that he never turned, and her paintings. And there's this mnemonic technique called a memory palace. And I was thinking about memory when I was in the apartment. In a memory palace, you arrange things in your mind that you want to remember as if they were tied to a physical place. And then when you try to remember them, you traverse in your mind that physical space and you take the memories out of niches or rooms or pedestals in your memory palace. It's a centuries-old memory technique, and I can't do it, but I gather all good, what do you call them, mnemonicists, rememberers, use this technique or variants of this technique. And I realized that that's what their apartment was. It was a memory palace. In reality, those souvenirs, the photographs of my children, of me and my brother when we were children, of my mom and dad at their wedding, things like that. Those were memories. Those were artifacts to conjure the memories. And at the same time, I was thinking about another concept, a cabinet of curiosities or wonder cabinet, which was this idea, this was like an Enlightenment thing, where you would prominently display treasures from around the world, biological specimens, historical relics, works of art, things like that. And it was that too. These were the most special things that they had had. And I was working through that grief for months. And so when we decided that we were going to make this adventure game, I wanted to make an adventure game about memory, about losing memory, about love, about losing a loved one, about not being able to save a loved one, and trying to treat death like a puzzle to be solved and not being able to solve that puzzle, and what it means for a man to not be able to save the person he loves, to have at his disposal a truly heroic set of tools. This was someone who had engineered aspects of space shuttles. This was someone who had been a pilot. He really could do a lot of things, but he couldn't solve dementia. And I wanted to make a game about those themes. And I wanted the game to take place in space, in an area, an environment that was a memory palace and a cabinet of curiosities, of course, it would be fantastical and much more fun and amazing and beautiful and frightening than just walking through a little apartment belonging to two old people. But I wanted that same experience for the player, where you find artifacts, and those artifacts are tied to memories and joy and grief and things like that. And so that was really the impetus that set Strangeland in motion from my standpoint.
Okay, that was actually quite touching. The story about, the developers' grandparents and how his step-grandfather was like this engineer, really accomplished one, but he still couldn't do anything to save his wife from dementia. Like, that's some heavy stuff.
Welcome to the mysteries of the deep. Home of the
Looks like it's electrified.
the vitriolic sea star.
It's a big switch in the on position. Not a bad grapple, if I do say so myself. Here goes nothing. Ha!
The electric gate is an effect generated when the game starts. It's a shader that was translated into a software renderer, which then gets exported into a 22-frame animation. It is pre-rendered because it can be executed without any slowdowns during runtime. It's one of the visual effects that I'm really happy about, because initially there was no electricity on that gate, and it made no sense why our protagonist wouldn't just climb over it. And being able to generate the effect on a code level left Victor free to focus on other art.
Come in! Read the plaques, play with the freaks, and plumb the mysteries of the deep.
I can't imagine things getting much more mysterious than they already are. But let's go see what they've got. Looks like a bird that's trying to fly, but is covered in oil.
The peregrine. As I approached, I could see its whole body craving into flight, but it could not fly. I gave it peace and saw the agonized sunlight on its eyes, slowly heal with cloud. No pain, no death is more terrible to a wild creature than its fear of a man. A red-throated diver, sudden and obscene with oil, able to move only its head, will push itself from the sea wall, and its bill, with its bill, if you reach down to it as it floats in a lag in the tide. Images of oil-soaked birds unable to fly were inescapable when Exxon Valdez spilled its oil along the Alaska coast in 1989. The yearning to fly is thematic throughout Strangeland, from the cicada to the stranger's own golden wings.
A dead bird, that is. Not exactly a mystery of the deep. I touch it, it's ruined. In for a penny?
In for a pound. The idiom means, having gone this far, I might as well see it through.
It's going to be hard enough already to get my hands clean. It's barbaric, but hey, it works.
Paraphrasing Aladdin. Okay.
Some kind of mermaid. Stream maid.
i.e. a water nymph or a mermaid found in a stream. The allusion here is to Rhine maidens in Richard Wagner's Ring Cycle, beautiful river maidens coveted by the dwarf Alberich. The stream-made mermaid herself is modeled after a famous Fiji mermaid displayed in the circus King P.T. Barnum displayed by the circus king P.T. Barnum at his American Museum, introduced to my generation by the X-Files episode Humbug in 1995.
Donated by Rhoda, Atri, and Alberic.
Rota, a ratman encountered below Strangeland, indirectly derived from Otr of the Volsung saga. Atri, in Norse mythology a dwarf tricked by Loki into crafting magical items for the gods. In Strangeland, this being now is known as the Furnace 8-3, Alberich, the dwarf antagonist of Wagner's Ring Cycle.
Black Swan.
A Black Swan event, per Nassim Nicholas Taleb in Fooled by Randomness and his later books, is an entirely unforeseen event of tremendous significance. The woman's cancer was such a Black Swan event for her and the stranger.
It doesn't look much like a swan to me. Marthasterius glacialis insolitus. Talk about a mouthful. Known for its irritability and powerful gastric acid. There's something disturbing about a starfish that big. Just looking at it makes my head hurt.
So the goal of the starfish puzzle is to get the starfish angry enough that he breaks his tube and spits acid on you, which kills you. And then you can take that acid and use it elsewhere in the game. In my mind, this is what I would call a flipped puzzle or a reversed puzzle, where initially the player, I think, will come to the puzzle thinking that his goal is to give answers that this starfish likes, because you're conditioned by BioWare games and so forth to think that dialogues are just about pandering to whoever you're talking to. And then at some point you maybe give a wrong answer and see that the tube is starting to crack and realize that that might be progress in some direction. And then you flip and you start trying to achieve the opposite of what you were initially trying to achieve, and then find success that way. The most immediate inspiration for this puzzle is a memorable one in Machinarium, where there's a vent fan, and it's very similar. You can either give answers that make it more or less angry, and the angrier it gets, the harder it blows. And my recollection is if you get it angry enough, it breaks the fan and then you can get in. Another of these really great flip puzzles is in Andrew Plotkin's text adventure, Shade. It's one of these one-room games where you're in an apartment and you're trying to find something, and every time you open a cabinet or a drawer, sand starts coming out of it. And there's this moment where the player flips from realizing, or realizes that the sand is not actually an obstacle, that his goal stops being to find whatever it is he had to find and becomes just to fill the apartment with sand. And so all the things you were trying to avoid before, you're now seeking out. And it's a really great moment. It's particularly great because Plotkin anticipates so well the moment in which the player's mentality shifts, and so the writing in the game reflects the player's shift in mentality. But I really like this kind of puzzle because it requires sort of environmental observation and thinking through what your goal actually is, rather than just falling forward. Which is sometimes what happens in adventure games.
He's throwing some shade at BioWare there.
My head. It's like something's in here.
The sea itself serves for my blood.
Starfish have no blood and instead simply pump salt water through their bodies.
Soft, common, weak. Each limb ends in an eye that separates light from dark.
Technically, the limbs end in a less developed organ called an eye spot. Eyes and the ability to choose between light and dark are thematic to Strangeland.
Inferior, simple contempt. I am and act, yet need no brain.
Starfish have no central nervous system. In essence, each limb has its own independent capacity to respond to external stimuli. Under the right stimulus, one limb can override the others.
Muck. Stupid. Weak. There are few who move with my symmetry. A ring with neither right nor left.
Because starfish are radially rather than bilaterally symmetrical, they don't have a left or right side to their bodies.
Wicked. Prison. Symbol.
That was unpleasant.
The burning brand you now bear is bright enough to beat back the dark, and hot enough to warm the dead. Go and make use of it.
Warm the dead, huh? Let's give it a try.
My embers are rekindled by my own fire, and I live again, at least while it lasts.
Were you actually dead? What was it like?
Cold and dark, an empty void with no air to breathe or burn, and endless time to feel the lack of life. That is what waits for us both.
The dark thing killed you, and I brought you back to life. Help me destroy it, for your sake and mine.
My hate burns hot for that impurity. But my fire has grown tired, and I have given you already the gift of a burning brand.
I need you to make me weapons.
Did I not give you the beak? A blade that cuts deep? Did I not make that work to order, as I swore? Trouble me no more with begging, and wield what you were given.
Did you help make the stream made in the mysteries of the deep?
I work in metal and shape with flame. The living have no place upon my anvil. Whoever this maiden is, she was forged by others' deeds.
Goodbye.
You have said so before.
Still burning with questions. The fire is fitting, and from it, we will draw truth. I see the end, Querent. I see the living die, and the dead speak, in the grey, grim home of ghosts. I see the one with wings rising up, ready to face his foe at last. Fool, hermit, hanged man, death, devil, emperor, priestess, lover, empress. You know what waits. You know the stakes. But I know no more. Now it falls to you to give the final answer.
That was unnerving. Let's see what the dark thing did.
Spirits.
Never know when some acid will come in handy. It's a bubbling puddle of sea star acid. The water must have drained out when it spat at me. Not a happy ending.
Okay, I feel like this episode has been long enough, so I'm going to save here and end it for now. That's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!